Karma doesn't need your words, it only needs your silence. That single truth is enough to terrify those who wronged you, because when you stay silent, you hand the stage to karma itself, and karma always delivers a punishment more brutal than anything you could ever say. We live in an age that worships noise. Everyone's desperate to prove something. In relationships, online battles, even within their own minds, they mistake reaction for power and confusion for connection. But silence is different. It's not retreat, it's control. It's the calm before karma moves. And when you master it, you become untouchable, because silence isn't passive, it's precision. So here's the real question. When someone betrays you, do you have the strength to let silence do the talking? Or do you still need the noise to feel seen? Drop a 1 if you've learned to let karma speak for you. Drop a 2 if you're still fighting to silence the chaos. Start this journey now. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join Stoic Silence, where we master the art of stillness and the psychology of karma's timing. Because what happens next will show you how silence doesn't just protect you, it exposes them. 1. Attention, the shock of stillness. When a man truly withdraws into silence, the balance of power shifts. At first, she mistakes it for indifference, but as hours turn into days, that stillness becomes unbearable. It's not absence she feels, it's the weight of exposure. Silence holds up a mirror she cannot escape, reflecting her own actions back at her. As Marcus Aurelius said, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Your silence is that revenge, controlled, graceful, and devastating. The quieter you become, the louder the truth screams. 2. Problem, the cycle of reaction. Every man who's been betrayed feels the same pull, the need to explain, to defend, to seek closure that never comes. You believe your words will fix what was broken, but all she sees is desperation disguised as control. Every message, every argument, every plea only feeds the fire consuming your dignity. The more you react, the smaller you become in her eyes. You don't lose power by staying silent. You lose it the moment you respond. 3. Setup, the battlefield of emotion. Modern relationships have become battlegrounds of validation, where noise replaces connection and attention becomes currency. She pulls away not to lose you, but to measure how fast you'll chase. Every delayed text, every silent hour is a test of your emotional discipline. When you react with panic, she feels power. When you chase, she confirms control. It's rarely about love. It's about dominance, ego, and emotional leverage. The truth is, she's not seeking your affection, she's seeking your reaction. And that's where most men fall, mistaking emotional chaos for passion. The Stoic man understands this terrain. He doesn't fight to win her back. He observes, stays grounded, and quietly withdraws. Because the moment you stop feeding the chaos, the game ends, and she's left alone with the silence she once created. 4. Conflict, the urge to speak. There comes a moment when silence feels unbearable. You feel it pressing in your chest, the urge to call, to explain, to remind her of what you had. Your mind convinces you that one message might fix it, that one conversation might make her see reason. But deep down, you know the truth. The second you break your silence, the balance collapses. You hand her the proof that she still owns a piece of you. Every word becomes a confession of emotional dependency. Every attempt to clarify becomes validation for her ego. She doesn't need your apology or your explanation. She only needs your reaction to know she still has control. And the more you speak, the smaller you appear in her eyes, because your voice tells her what your silence once concealed, that she still matters more than your peace. The harsh truth is that silence tests your strength more than any argument ever could. It demands self-command, the ability to resist the temptation to prove your worth to someone who has already devalued it. The Stoic man understands that real control begins where explanation ends. The hardest battle isn't against her, it's against your own impulse to respond. And when you win that war, you don't just reclaim your power, you redefine it. 5. Agitate. The emotional consequence. Every reaction drains a part of you. You may think you're defending your dignity, but in truth, you're leaking energy into someone who stopped valuing it long ago. You replay conversations in your head, crafting the perfect line, rewriting texts you'll never send, all to be heard by someone who's no longer listening. That endless cycle doesn't heal you. It keeps you enslaved to the same person who disrespected your worth. The more you explain, the more you prove your dependence. You begin to trade peace for attention, self-respect for validation. And that is the silent decay of a man's power, when his emotions are ruled by the one who hurt him. But here's the paradox. Silence hurts too, yet it hurts with purpose. Because the pain of silence is temporary, it cleanses. The pain of reaction lingers. It stains. One leads to peace, the other to endless exhaustion. Choose the silence that heals. 6. Solution. The Stoic response. The moment you realize that silence is not weakness but precision, everything changes. It's not withdrawal, it's strategy. When you refuse to react, you suffocate their ego, starving the part of them that feeds on your attention. You do nothing, say nothing, move forward quietly. Yet that quiet motion holds immense power. Your absence becomes the mirror where their guilt echoes, and the longer it lasts, the louder it grows. As Miyamoto Musashi wrote, "Step by step, walk the path alone." That path isn't isolation, it's mastery. You learn to detach without bitterness, to walk away without noise, and to rise without permission. Your restraint becomes their reflection. Your silence becomes the judgment they can't outrun. So stay composed, grounded, and busy with your purpose. Don't chase closure, don't explain, don't defend. Because truth doesn't need your words. It reveals itself through time. Silence turns you from the participant into the observer, from the victim into the judge. Once you master silence, you don't just control the situation, you control the entire battlefield. 7. Conflict deepens. The breaking point. At first, she performs indifference like a script she's memorized. Posts that sparkle with forced joy, laughter a little too loud, captions a little too sharp, stories crafted to suggest a life that never even pauses to think of you. You see it for what it is, theater. But the audience she's trying to convince isn't the world, it's herself. The longer you remain silent, the more the set lights dim and the props look cheap. Your absence isn't a gap in the noise, it's a weight in the room. It sits at the edge of her bed when the phone screen stays dark. It lingers in the kitchen when the coffee cools and no message comes. She says you are cold, aloof, unbothered. Yet the truth presses against her ribs in the late hours. She cannot read you anymore, and what cannot be read cannot be controlled. Silence works like gravity, unseen, patient, precise. It pulls at loose threads she thought were tied, and soon she feels the tug in places she didn't know were fraying. She replays what she said, what she did, and then, more obsessively, what you chose not to say. Your unsent paragraph becomes a mirror she keeps returning to, looking for proof that she didn't miscalculate. She scrolls back through the timeline in her mind and finds the last moment you could have reacted and didn't. One withheld reply becomes a question, a day becomes a pattern, a week becomes a verdict. This is where the cracks form, not with thunder, but with tiny, quiet splits along the surface of her certainty. You are not doing nothing, You are practicing the most difficult discipline a man can learn, to refuse to feed what seeks to feed on him. She was used to your emotion on demand, the apology on cue, the long message at 1:13 a.m., the call that arrived exactly when her doubt needed oxygen. That rhythm is broken now. Your silence is not an empty space. It is the refusal to play music for a dance that humiliated you. She senses it even as she tries to laugh louder. The laughter does not reach her eyes because she is listening for a notification that never lands. Your name used to command her attention. Now your quiet commands it more. There will be moments when she tries to flip the frame. She will accuse you of pride, of childishness, of cruelty. She may send a message baited with nostalgia, or a question that appears harmless but is engineered to measure your temperature. Hope you're well. In other seasons of your life, you would have sprinted toward that opening, grateful for a stage to prove yourself. But you have learned the difference between resolution and rehearsal. You do not step into the play again. You hold your ground with dignity, and dignity is heavier than any declaration you could send. She feels that weight. She calls it distance. You know it as self-respect. This is the psychology the noisy world never teaches men. Attention is leverage. Once given freely, it becomes a leash. Once guarded, it becomes a standard. Your calm is no longer a tactic, it is a boundary. And boundaries do not argue, they do not scream, they simply exist. She discovers this each time she pushes against the wall of your silence and finds it unmoved. The more she insists you explain yourself, the more she hears the echo of her own actions. The more she tries to narrate your motives, the more she realizes she has lost her favorite instrument, your reaction. Without it, her story can no longer be scored in your blood. Late at night, when the performance ends and the mirrors are unforgiving, she meets the consequence of what she thought she could outrun. The interior court. No judge, no jury, just the quiet that turns the volume up on regret. Your stillness is the usher. The memory of what she did is the witness. She tries to silence the witness with distractions, new faces, short trips, crowded rooms, but every pause contains the same question. If he no longer answers, what does that say about me? It is not revenge you sought, it is recovery. Yet your recovery confronts her with the one reflection she refused to see while you were busy explaining. She is learning what few admit. Silence is not the absence of a voice, it is the presence of consequences. You, meanwhile, step back from the ledge of compulsion. You no longer check the screen in reflex, no longer rehearse speeches to an imaginary jury. You return to the clean architecture of a disciplined life, training, study, craft, honest work. There is nothing dramatic to post about that. There is no applause for it. That is precisely why it works. Your days thicken with meaning that does not depend on her weather. Your nights become breathable. You do not punish. You do not parade. You simply choose a different center. And the more you inhabit it, the more your composure writes a quiet message she cannot unsee. You were not an option. You were a standard. You remember the line from Marcus Aurelius, not as decoration but as instruction. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. You practice it in the space between impulse and action. The urge to reach for the phone rises like heat. You let it pass like a cloud. The old reflex knocks. You do not open the door. This is not stubbornness, it is stewardship. A man who cannot guard his attention cannot guard his peace, and a man who cannot guard his peace will trade it for any scrap of validation offered by the person who wounded him. That trade is how dignity dies. You will not make it again. As the days accumulate, she cycles through the predictable weather, dismissal, curiosity, irritation, nostalgia, And finally, the quiet panic of realizing you do not orbit her anymore. She may try to provoke, to triangulate, to be seen with a new hand on her shoulder. But the currency of spectacle has collapsed because you are no longer buying. The market changes when the main buyer leaves. Without your reaction, her strategies feel strangely small to her. The thrill of a display dissolves into an aftertaste she cannot sweeten. None of this moved you. The scoreboard she used to check is gone. She is not losing to another man. She is losing to your self-command. This is the breaking point. Not a scene, not a grand apology, but a slow internal admission that you will not be returning to the old arrangement. She will not name it out loud. She may never message it, but it lives in the way her eyes pause when your name is mentioned, in the way her laughter shortens after the camera stops, in the late scrolls through your page that ends with the screen going black. She will tell herself you changed. You will know you returned to yourself. That is the difference. The man who once reacted now chooses. The man who once bled energy now preserves it. The man who once begged to be understood now understands. What respects you remains. What does not fades without ceremony. And so the unraveling continues, not because you wished her harm, but because you chose health. Not because you played a game better, but because you stopped playing games at all. The world will call this cold. It is, in fact, warm with integrity. You honored the pain by refusing to turn it into entertainment. You let truth do what truth does without forcing it to arrive with trumpets. You accepted that love without respect is a rehearsal for loss, and you quietly refused to audition again. The longer the silence, the faster the performance ends. The longer the silence, the clearer the mirror becomes. The longer the silence, the more a man can hear the steady rhythm of his own life returning to him. She will feel all of it, the gravity, the echo, the verdict, and she will call it many names. Call it what it is, your peace. 8. Agitate again. The inner war. There will be nights when the silence feels heavier than any argument you've ever had. The world quiets, and your mind begins its rebellion. It whispers, text her, just to prove you've moved on. But that urge, that flicker of restlessness, is not strength, it's disguise. Reaction always wears the mask of progress. You tell yourself you've grown, yet the moment you reach for the phone, you surrender the ground you fought to claim. Power isn't motion, it's mastery. True strength is the stillness that resists the need to be seen. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the best answer to anger is silence. Let that truth anchor you. Let them feel the void they created, the echo of your absence, the mirror of your restraint. Because time and karma speak louder than words ever could. My silence is my shield. My peace is my proof. My indifference is my revenge. 9. Solution: rebuild in the void. When the noise fades and the last message remains unanswered, what's left is the void, vast, quiet, and mercilessly honest. In that stillness, most men panic. They mistake the silence for loneliness, the absence for loss. But the truth is, this is the space where transformation begins. The battlefield has gone silent, not because you were defeated, but because there's nothing left to fight for. The echoes that once haunted you slowly turn inward, and you realize the war was never with her. It was with the parts of yourself that still needed her validation to feel alive. Now, in the aftermath, your silence is no longer a defense. It becomes your discipline. Each day without reaction sharpens you. Each moment of restraint rebuilds the edges of your identity. You stop waiting for closure. Stop wondering if she regrets it. Stop checking the spaces where her name used to appear. The absence that once tore you apart now starts to build you back together. This is where the Stoic path begins, not in grand speeches or revenge fantasies, but in quiet mornings where you choose control over chaos, purpose over pain. You start small, you rise earlier, you train, you work, you think. The mind that once obsessed over her texts begins to crave better battles, inner ones. The same energy that used to chase her attention now becomes the fire that tempers your patience. You learn to be still, to live without the need for applause or acknowledgement. You learn to exist completely within yourself. The silence that once felt like exile now becomes your monastery. It teaches you to rebuild without witnesses. There will be days when your thoughts drift back to her, memories replay, tempting you to break your own discipline. But this time, you don't chase the ghosts. You study them. You observe your emotions as a Stoic observes the waves. They rise, they crash, and they pass. You understand that feelings, no matter how intense, are visitors, not masters. Marcus Aurelius once said, or could have said, "The man who commands his inner world is untouched by the storms of others." That becomes your mantra. Each time the mind pulls you toward the past, you bring it home to the present. Each time the heart aches, you remind it that pain is proof you cared, not proof you must return. Rebuilding in the void is not about becoming colder, it's about becoming clearer. You begin to separate what was real from what was illusion. You see how much of what you called love was dependency, how much of what you called connection was control. The silence forces you to confront these truths, the kind most men spend a lifetime avoiding. But you don't run. You sit with them. You allow them to strip you bare until only the essential remains. And what remains is stronger than before. It's leaner, lighter, unburdened by the need to be understood. You begin to build from that foundation. You return to the things you neglected, your craft, your health, your focus. You rediscover the quiet joy of effort, the satisfaction of doing something that doesn't require anyone's permission. You stop reacting and start creating. The same silence that once reminded you of what you lost now begins to reflect what you're gaining: discipline, balance, and peace. The beauty of this phase is invisible to others. They might see your calm and mistake it for apathy, but beneath it lives a quiet fire. You are not suppressing emotion, you are mastering it. You no longer bleed energy into black holes of misunderstanding. You conserve it. You invest it. You live intentionally, not impulsively. And with every day that passes, your silence evolves from self-protection into self-possession. You stop being the man who withdraws to avoid pain, and you become the man who stands alone because he has found his peace. Do not watch her stories. Do not wait for her guilt. Karma doesn't need an audience, and your healing doesn't need a witness. You are no longer a participant in that theater. Your story has shifted from what happened to what you are becoming. The world outside may not notice the transformation yet, but time will. The weight you carry will change form, no longer the heaviness of grief, but the gravity of calm. You will move differently, speak differently, exist differently. People will feel it, even in your silence. Your solitude, once feared, becomes sacred. You begin to protect it like a ritual. The routines that anchor your days, the morning discipline, the evening reflection, the quiet between tasks, become the pillars of a new life. You don't rebuild to prove anything. You rebuild because stillness is your natural state and peace is your true inheritance. You no longer crave her validation because you've replaced it with self-respect. You no longer wait for her apology because forgiveness has become unnecessary. You no longer seek closure because silence itself has closed the door. You rise from the void as someone unrecognizable to your former self, not because you've become harder, but because you've become whole. The version of you that begged for understanding has dissolved into something quieter, wiser, and infinitely stronger. You've learned that silence was never the absence of power, it was the preparation for it. Affirm to yourself, I don't chase closure. I create peace. I don't react. I rise. And when you finally look back, you'll see it clearly. The void you once feared was never empty. It was full of everything you needed to become who you were meant to be. 10. Resolution, the Unbreakable Man. When the noise finally dies and the echoes of her name no longer command your pulse, something extraordinary happens. You begin to meet yourself. Not the version that begged, not the one that argued, not the man who carried the weight of proving his worth, but the one beneath it all. The man who survives the silence. The man who learns that peace is not given, it is built. There was a time when her voice filled the room, when your mind replayed every word like a film you could not stop. You looked for meaning in her absence, reasons in her withdrawal, and mercy in her indifference. But the truth, as cruel as it first seemed, was simple. Her leaving was the beginning of your becoming. You mistook her for the storm, when in truth she was only the wind that revealed your foundation. Silence arrived like a punishment, but it became a teacher. At first it screamed in your ears, reminding you of what you'd lost. It pulled you toward old habits, the urge to explain, to fix, to seek closure. But over time, the silence stopped being her absence and started becoming your presence. You realized that stillness does not mean emptiness, it means control. You stopped waiting for her to understand you and began the long journey of understanding yourself. Each day you walked without her became a lesson in detachment. You learned that real strength is not resistance, but acceptance, the ability to let life move through you without losing your balance. Betrayal no longer burned you, it refined you. The fire that once consumed your peace now forged your patience. You stopped asking, "Why did she do it?" and began to ask, "What can I learn from this pain?" The answer came slowly, in quiet mornings and long nights. You learned that people do not betray you because of who you are. They betray you because of who they are not yet ready to be. You learned that the love you gave freely was never wasted. It was simply misdelivered. Every moment of care, every act of devotion, every sacrifice that went unnoticed was a seed. It did not die in her absence. It took root in your evolution. You began to see that forgiveness was not about her. It was about freeing yourself from the chains of resentment. Forgiveness is not weakness, it is clarity. It is saying, you no longer have power over the peace I now protect. You stopped defining yourself by what happened and started shaping yourself by what you chose next. There came a moment, quiet but unmistakable, when you felt something shift. The same memories that once tore you open began to pass through you like wind through a hollow reed. They no longer hurt. They simply existed. You realized that peace is not forgetting. It's remembering without bleeding. That was the day your silence stopped being defense and became discipline. The mind will always test you. It will whisper, reach out, just one more message, just one more explanation. But wisdom teaches you that closure is a myth created by the wounded to delay their healing. You learn to sit with the discomfort, to let the ache breathe and then fade. You learn to trust the process of time, to let reality balance its own scales. For as Marcus Aurelius might have said, no man is broken by what happens to him, only by the way he responds to it. Your response was silence, and that changed everything. You stopped chasing answers in the outside world and began to find them within. You no longer needed to prove your worth. You began to live it. You realized that discipline is love turned inward. The workouts you never skipped, the projects you finished, the promises you kept to yourself, those became the proof that you no longer needed from her. You didn't rise to show her what she lost. You rose because you finally remembered who you are. There's a strange kind of freedom that comes when you no longer need to be understood. You move differently. You speak less. You observe more. The world still spins, but you no longer chase its rhythm. You create your own. The peace you build within starts to radiate outward. People sense it, even if they can't explain it. They call it confidence, mystery, self-control. But you know the truth. It's mastery. You have mastered the hardest art there is, the art of remaining calm in a world addicted to reaction. When she left, she expected noise. She expected you to fall apart, to fight, to beg. Instead, you chose stillness. And that stillness spoke louder than any argument could. It told her and the world that your peace was not up for negotiation. It told her that your silence was not emptiness but judgment, not retreat but reign. Over time, you stopped looking at her as the villain. You began to see her as the mirror that showed you where you had abandoned yourself. Every disappointment pointed to a truth you had ignored. Every rejection reminded you that dependence is the enemy of freedom. The pain was not punishment, it was redirection, and you followed it inward until you found the man who no longer needed saving. There were days when the silence felt heavy again, when memories pressed against your ribs like ghosts asking to be heard. But you didn't fight them anymore. You let them come, let them pass, let them fade. That's how the mind cleanses itself, not by denial but by acceptance. You learned to sit inside your solitude until solitude became sanctuary. And in that sanctuary, you rebuilt. Not in the way the world measures rebuilding, with wealth or revenge, but with stillness. You built consistency. You built patience. You built a sense of purpose so quiet that no one could shake it. You stopped performing strength and started living it. The man you became in the silence didn't need to announce his growth. It was written in the way he carried himself. Now, when you walk into a room, you bring the calm with you. You don't flinch when provoked, don't explain when misunderstood, don't chase when ignored. You've learned that the need to prove yourself is the last form of dependence. You no longer crave validation because you understand that self-respect is the highest currency a man can own. She may think she broke you. The truth is, she introduced you to yourself. Her betrayal was the storm that revealed your depth. Without it, you would have remained half awake, still seeking meaning in others, instead of creating it within. The silence that followed her absence was not an ending, it was initiation. You stepped into the void and discovered that it was not empty at all. It was filled with everything you had been avoiding, your fear, your longing, your capacity for peace. You faced them all, and you did not run. That is what makes you unbreakable. Not that pain can no longer reach you, but that it can no longer rule you. You've seen what lies beyond reaction, the stillness where clarity lives. You've learned that self-control is not suppression, but understanding. You don't bury emotion, you observe it until it loses its power. You don't avoid conflict, you transcend it. This is the essence of Stoicism. Not coldness, but composure. To feel deeply and yet remain steady. To love fully and yet let go gracefully. To suffer without bitterness and rise without noise. You embody that now. You've become the living expression of what every philosopher meant when they spoke of inner freedom. You no longer fear losing people. You fear losing yourself in the process of keeping them. You no longer chase what leaves because you've seen how silence turns loss into liberation. The longer you stayed quiet, the faster the illusions broke. Ego cannot survive in the presence of calm truth. Lies dissolve when there is no reaction to sustain them. Her guilt, her confusion, her regret, they were never your responsibility. Silence returned them to their rightful owner. There will come a day, if it hasn't already, when she thinks of you again, not because you reminded her, but because your absence never stopped reminding her of herself. She'll remember the calm you carried, the way your silence unsettled her louder than words ever could. She'll look for that same peace elsewhere and find only noise. But by then you won't need her recognition. You'll be too far beyond it, quietly building, quietly living, quietly free. The unbreakable man is not the one who feels nothing. He is the one who feels everything, yet remains unmoved by it. He has learned to let life flow through him without drowning in it. His heart is open, but his peace is guarded. His silence is not an act, it is his nature. And so, when the world tests you again, and it will, remember what this silence has taught you. You are not defined by what happens, but by how you hold yourself when it does. You are not here to win arguments or prove innocence. You are here to master the only battlefield that ever mattered, your mind. In the end, silence was never about her. It was about reclaiming the throne within. You've realized that power is not loud, it is consistent. That confidence is not defiance, it is calm. That love, when pure, does not demand, it allows. You are not the same man who once begged to be understood. You have become the man who no longer needs to explain. Your peace is your statement, your silence is your signature, and those who once mistook your stillness for weakness now see it for what it truly is, sovereignty. Remember this truth: the longer the silence, the faster they break, not because you wish them harm, but because silence exposes what noise conceals. You never needed revenge. The absence of your reaction was the verdict. The patience of your composure was the sentence. So stand where you are, calm, complete, and free. The game has long ended. You no longer chase, defend, or demand. You exist in the rarest form of power, peace. I don't need revenge. My silence already delivered it. And now, if these words reach the quiet part of you, the part that no longer wants to fight, but to be still, then you already understand what comes next. This is not an ending, it's an initiation. You've walked through betrayal, endured the noise, and rebuilt yourself in silence. Now it's time to stand among those who walk the same path. Men who no longer seek approval, but purpose. Men who understand that restraint is not weakness, it's power refined. Subscribe to Stoic Silence and step into the brotherhood of calm men. Men who rise through discipline, not drama. Who rebuild in solitude, not chaos. Here, we don't chase validation. We cultivate presence. We don't shout for respect. We command it through composure. And we don't wait for karma. We become the balance. The world will test your silence. It will try to provoke your peace, to pull you back into the noise. But remember what you've learned. The longer you remain still, the faster falsehoods fall apart. Stay calm, stay grounded, stay untouchable, because in the end, the silence you keep is the crown you wear. And the longer the silence, the faster they break, and the stronger you become.